Welcome to the Engineering Influence podcast presented by the American Council of Engineering Companies. Probably more so than in any year in recent memory, business planning in 2021 may feel like trying to find the light switch in a pitch black room. To help with that challenge, Mark Goodale of Morrissey Goodale presented an ACEC online class a couple weeks ago titled The Year After, Good, Bad, or Just Plain Ugly. I encourage you to listen to the class because Mark covers a wide range of important topics, and he's joined us today to delve a little deeper into some of the overarching issues. So Mark, first off, given the challenges of 2020, it would be reasonable to expect engineering firms to have taken some pretty big hits during the year, but you found that the industry as a whole actually performed well, coming into 2021 with strong backlogs and record profits. What happened?
Yeah, what happened is a great question. It defies a lot of logic, that's for sure. When the pandemic first hit, we thought that it was going to be a very, very difficult time for the industry. But as we watched in the first few weeks and the first few months, we saw that as certainly some doors closed. I mean, you had retail shutting down, you had anything travel related just came to a grinding halt. And certainly lots and lots of projects went on hold. But they only went on hold. They were delayed, but they weren't canceled. And that was pretty much across the board, except again for a couple of markets. And we also saw some shifts. You saw when retail went down, online shopping did not. Certainly distribution centers, warehouses, that kind of thing just took off. And if you were working for Amazon or Target, you had more work than you knew what to do with. And certainly in other markets like housing, back in the last recession, housing shut down all at once. There were some problems, underlying problems with the economy, which we didn't have this time around. The economy was generally in good shape, and so it could withstand some blows. And you look at housing, that was more sort of regional decision making was happening there. So if you had some demand in some areas, the development kept going. There were still housing shortages in some areas around the country, in a lot of areas around the country. And so you saw, instead of just a wide shutdown, you saw some regional activity staying red hot. You also saw in infrastructure, again, some of those projects were delayed, but they came back online fairly quickly, relatively quickly, given what was going on. And things got going again. So you saw in healthcare, for example, you saw instead of new hospitals, there were shifts to accommodate COVID, and that kept a lot of mechanical and electrical firms busy retrofitting facilities to respond to COVID. So lots of shifting around versus just total shutdowns. And certainly some firms were hurt, but we talked to hundreds of firms, did a bunch of surveys, and firms were having record years, both from a revenue standpoint and from a profitability standpoint. And the big issue is they still can't find enough people to do the work. So what's happening in the stock market made no sense at the time either. And so lots of things are very, very counterintuitive. But you look around the country too. The other thing is that not every state really shut down. You look at the Northeast, New York, Massachusetts, where it was pretty bad early on and certainly has been again recently. Everything just really shut down. But other parts of the country, the Southeast, in Florida, for example, we have plenty of clients in Florida that we talk to, and other firms that we talk to in Florida. And, they basically say it's sort of like the pandemic really never showed up there. They really never shut down. So you can look around the country and see that some states, some regions kept things going for the most part. There were some shutdowns for a while, but they got back to it pretty quickly. And you can probably follow political lines to some degree to see that pattern.
Does it speak at all to engineering firms' ability to sort of move with the market, to adapt as the market changes more so than other firms?
Well, to some degree, yes. I think a lot of our firms are just in these sort of vital to life markets to begin with. And we benefited from that in a big way. I think Two, a big issue was that a lot of the firms that we talked to had already made investments in teams and things like that, remote working tools, and weren't really using them. When you think about it, before the pandemic, if we were to call up a new client and have a discussion, it would always be by phone. It would almost seem pretentious to say, oh, let's have a Teams call. It would just be a little bit much. But now it's normal. So a lot of firms were ready to make the switch to remote working pretty quickly and seamlessly. A few didn't. I know of a couple of clients of mine that actually picked up work from rivals who weren't able to make that switch. But by and large, our industry was on top of being able to work remotely. And that really helped the industry in a big way, having made those investments previously.
You mentioned just a moment ago about the big challenge continues to be finding good people. During your online class, you actually called them unicorns, which you described as engineers with 5 to 15 years of experience and good people skills. So while there's no silver bullet here, do you have any advice to firms that you work with about how to find these people?
Yeah, I do. And the unicorns are out there. They're hard to, you can find them. They're not a ton of them, but they're hard to move. And especially given still a lot of uncertainty and pardon the expression, the devil you know, if you will. But the ability of a firm to quickly hire qualified people for existing and future openings directly affects the level of serviceability the firm can achieve and how much it can produce. And it also influences how the firm deals with marginal employees and transitions leadership and ownership over time. And how it responds to the loss of a key person for any variety of reasons. So a few thoughts to consider in creating this sort of continuous recruiting approach, which sort of the mode you need to be in. Number one, you got to be recruiting around the clock. So you got to build a backlog of high potential individuals and get them in line for positions that have been historically hard for your firm to fill. So there should never be a time when your firm is not accepting applications. And a lot of this, Jerry, is sort of blocking and tackling, right? So establish a database of every candidate who's ever sent in a resume or interviewed or filled out an application for employment at your company, and then classify those people according to what they do and where their credentials are, not which position they were applying for or which ad they responded to, and then search the database every time a need develops. You want to stay in touch with those people the firm would eventually like to hire. It's like any good client, good candidates need to be courted essentially, and the best people are not out there looking for work. They're already employed. We know that. So that being the case, your firm really has to spend time with top industry performers to build their interest in coming into the firm. It's rarely an overnight process, and it often takes months to materialize. You should also hire with the thought of the person filling a role 2 levels beyond the current need. That's really important because a lot of firms don't end up thinking about developing the I'd say, behavior sets for taking care of the concerns of the firm. It's why succession is a big problem in the industry. We've got these sort of entrepreneurial folks who surround themselves with technical folks who can get the work done, but don't have the inclination to be leaders. And then those behavior sets that are required to be a leader are not developed, and you get stuck. So look for those folks and with a mind on 2 positions beyond the current need. And then leverage your marketing department. Cross over into your marketing department and help them sell the firm to candidates, not just clients, and create campaigns geared to attract candidates. Anything that's going out to clients, you may want to target some specific individuals and make sure they're getting that sort of those touches as well.
I mean, it's interesting. You talked about it in hiring someone. You talked about succession, which your firm being heavily involved in firms, in the sale and purchase of firms. With succession being such a difficult thing with entrepreneurs aging out, you found that private equity is making a big play into our space. In fact, in your most recent survey, you found that, let me see here, 42% of AE firm deals in the first part of 2021 had a private equity component. Why do you think private equity is moving into our space? And more importantly, what impact do you think that's going to have?
Well, I've from what I understand and from the conversations I've had with private equity, they see this as a very, very compelling industry. They see opportunities to grow and increase efficiencies, and they know these services are needed and are going to be needed for a long, long time. And so they find it very attractive. And it's smart people, doing very important work, and it's not like we've cornered the market on best practices. So there is an opportunity to create some competitive advantages and generate some significant profitability and so forth. So they see those opportunities, and it's driving up competition in hot regions for sure with what I would call the strategic buyers. The other AE firms and other consulting engineering firms and EA and all that, and looking for good consulting engineering firms. It's driving up competition in a big way. And they're, the PEs, they're offering lots of cash up front. Typically, they pay higher multipliers, and they don't necessarily require a firm to change its identity or culture as with the strategic buyers. So it's real, it's happening, and we're seeing the model change from an employee owner model to an investor owner model right before our eyes. And there's been some success stories. I know of a firm in the Midwest that was about a 140 person firm. They recapitalized through private equity, and on just this in the last several months, and just past New Year's, they used this recapitalization to double in size, almost literally overnight. So it is through an acquisition of a firm slightly bigger than itself. So it's opening up a lot of windows for firm owners that happen to be quite entrepreneurial and aspirational about their organizations.
On that point is, you mentioned that was a 140 person firm. How small do these PE buyers, how small are they willing to go?
Well, that's a great question, Jerry, because a year or two ago, that 140 person firm probably wouldn't have been on their radar, but they're now getting into that, high double digits, low triple digit firm. And before it used to be, they'd need a lot of EBITDA to go after it. And that threshold is falling by the day, and they're looking to bolt on. As you know, there's only so many of those mid-sized, platform-sized firms out there, and I think PE is it's a highly fragmented industry we're in, as you know, and I think the PE buyers are beginning to realize that it's a finite world out there, even though there's tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 of these types of firms in our industry. There are only so many that have a critical mass. So I think they're dropping there. More and more firms are getting onto their radar that are a bit smaller than when they started.
One of the issues you talked about in your online class was the digitization. That's a tough word. Digitization of the industry. And you actually said, I thought it was clever. You said firms becoming more like technology firms that do engineering. Looking at technology as sort of a leveler, it seemed to me that was a path to commoditization. But you've had the absolutely opposite reaction. What do you see that I don't see here?
Yeah, I don't know. I may see a mirage, but I guess I see it as an opportunity for the professionals in our industry to spend more time on their highest and best uses. And I see an evolution toward our industry becoming an ideas-based industry versus an industry that produces plans and is basically an order taker. So I see a ton of opportunity for innovation. To me, technology, it used to be that if you had a great idea, you'd have to wait for technology to catch up to it. But technology has been developing at such a rapid pace all along, and it's been a nice to have, but not a have to have. And in many ways, COVID made it a have to have. So we realize now what we can do with it. And I think some of the more progressive firms and the larger firms are on top of this already, and some of the smaller firms will struggle because they don't have the capital structure and the I guess the expertise to fully leverage it. However, I do think that technology has always been a disruptor. It's going to continue to be a major disruptor, and we see evidence of that already. My sense, though, again, is that I just think that it opens the door for true innovation in our industry, and that we're not caught up in doing so much of the blocking and tackling of design, that we can get out in front of some of that and really become something even more special than we already are as an industry.
To circle back on the issue about finding good people, what role would a firm that is highly technological, would they have a significant advantage over other firms in getting these unicorns?
Yeah, when these unicorns see the kinds of opportunities that they can get involved with, and how technology can open so many doors for them, and they can self-actualize in these organizations. These folks coming up through the ranks now, these unicorns, the younger folks, they're looking for an organization that has a real purpose to it. And a lot of firms do in our industry. That's all that hard work is taken care of. They're also looking for mastery, an opportunity to get better at doing something and to fully realize their own potential. And certainly for autonomy and the opportunity to use their autonomy responsibly, and that they're trusted to do so. And with technology, again, they can use their creativity and they can innovate. And boy, you see a firm that's out in front with that kind of thing. That's where the special people want to go. The hardworking, smart people want to go to do something special with their careers.
You mentioned a couple of times innovation. In fact, that was a major focus of your talk. And you say that innovation will separate the winners from the losers. I was sort of maybe a little confused, because innovation's one of those words that that we all know, but I'm not sure I understand exactly what it is. In the business context for engineering firms, where the rubber hits the road, what is innovation?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's kind of like people talk about culture all the time, and they really haven't a clue as to how you might get a good handle on elements of culture, and a topic for another time. But it's similar with innovation as well. And typically, when folks talk about innovation, the discussion peters out pretty quickly, and it's for a fleeting moment. There's some discussion about process improvement, and there's some of that for sure, but the core of innovation really isn't that. When you get right down to it, in simple words, it's bringing something to market that clients couldn't get up to that point. They couldn't get it before. And the key is creating an environment and even a mood for innovation in your organization. And that requires living in your client's domain, what's called living in your client's domain, which is understanding and anticipating their wants and needs, and baking that into the way that you even think about your projects. For example, a lot of projects start with, maybe a kickoff meeting, maybe not, hopefully a signed contract. But anyway, it's sort of like, okay, here we go. You've got 20 hours to do this. You've got 40 hours to do that. Break the huddle, and everybody's off working in their own little tent on some piece of the project. And when you think about true innovation, you're thinking about maybe chartering your projects and thinking about actual project goals and client goals, aspirational goals for the project. And that doesn't happen too much in our industry. It makes you think about, it gets you away from a cookie cutter approach. I'll give you an example that's non-engineering, consulting engineering based, like in our industry. I'll give you two examples of innovation. One was Lexus when they first came out. Lexus, and it's kind of interesting because it was all their innovation was predicated on a statement that it was a this yet that statement. I want this yet that. Two seemingly diametrically opposed things that they wanted. And what Lexus wanted was a car that was as quiet inside as a Mercedes was at the time, and had at least as good a gas mileage as a Volkswagen. Two seemingly diametrically opposed forces here. Because if you want to make a car quiet, what do? You load it up with insulation, that increases the weight, and there goes your gas mileage. So the scientists and the engineers at Lexus needed to think differently if they wanted both of these things. And so the way they thought differently was they started to look at noise in a vehicle, what makes sound in a vehicle. And they realized that comes from vibration. So instead of cladding up a car with insulation, they went to the source of the vibration and removed it, eliminated it. And they didn't have to weight down the car. And they ended up with a car that was quieter than Mercedes and got better gas mileage than a Volkswagen. And they ate everybody's lunch out of the gate, sold more cars than Mercedes and BMW combined when they first came out. The second is orange juice containers. For those of you out there who are old enough to remember when you used to have those orange juice paper cartons, and you'd open the spout, and within 4 or 5 days, what happened to that orange juice container spout, it would crust up and be all bacteria and filled and nasty and all that. And it was kind of gross. And sometimes you just empty out the juice and throw the carton out. Well, that led to an innovation, which actually saved the paperboard industry. But it was the little plastic spouts now on the side of the paperboard containers. And it was actually a welding process, and that was actually patented. But now you have a carton that the juice doesn't outlive. And that was something that you couldn't get before. And so that's what you think about when you think about innovation. What can we bring to market that doesn't exist today so we can create a significant competitive advantage? And with so many doors open today, there's a lot of opportunity to do that. The window won't stay open forever. I would say probably 12 to 24 months is when firms who get out in front of this are going to catch some waves, and they're going to get way out in front. So that's what I see in terms of innovation, Jerry.
You mentioned that in your talk, you're optimistic about 2021, and talking about an open window for enterprising firms to ride. What is it about 2021 that is offering this wave?
Well, I think when you look at so many things are changing. The world is changing, and it's creating these opportunities that didn't exist before. And again, these enterprising firms are going to be on top of those opportunities. And I'll run through a few different markets here, kind of pell-mell, and give you my thoughts here. But first of all, infrastructure, it's kind of an obvious one. The single quickest way to put a whole bunch of people back to work is infrastructure, and the needs are well documented. And with a massive infrastructure plan bill on the way, I think plenty of projects will be ready to go. It'll take a little time to get through the system, but that's waiting in the wings. Look at healthcare design and construction, for example. Hospitals, they're going to need to operate differently. What made sense pre-pandemic doesn't make sense anymore. And even as we get back to, quote, normal, we're still going to have threats of pandemics. These things are going to continue to crop up, hopefully not anytime soon, but there's concern about that. So let me give you a simple example. Clean and dirty linens handling. The best thinking prior to the pandemic was to distribute clean and dirty linens across the floor, so those turning over the rooms didn't have to walk as far. We're worried about people putting a lot of mileage on their 2 feet. You'd have 4 to 5 different pickup and drop-off zones across the floor to keep nurses from not having to walk too far. But it's a biohazard now, and these places all have to be cleaned, and so there's a lot that needs to change just from a very basic perspective. Air conditioning systems that come in and the returns. Turns out that the returns in the bathroom need to be moved closer to the floor and not on the wall. And that's a completely different way that hospitals are laid out right now. So major renovations and rethinking of what's needed has been underway for a while and continues to be. Big change orders for projects that were in the build phase and being planned and so forth. You look at commercial space, open space, floor plans are over. The pandemic has confronted us. So we have to change the spaces we occupy, and we have to rebuild and remodel and build new. We have to do all of that, knock down, build new, all that. You look at universities and labs. Prior to the pandemic, Amgen, for example, wanted people closer to be more collaborative. And they moved to a model of 155 people on each floor. Well, that thinking is reversed. You look at stadiums and spectator sports, something's going to have to dramatically change. We've got the vaccines coming out there, but still, we're going to have loud voices expressing these micro droplets that don't fall to the ground, and misting that comes from these bellicose speaking, and that floats in the air. What do you have at stadiums? You have screaming, and even though the vaccines are out, there's still going to be a lot of thought put into that going forward. Movement out of cities. Look at the demographics. Communities that ring cities are growing. For example, close to me in Newton, Massachusetts, 4 to 6 story residential buildings that are being built, that would have never happened before the pandemic. So demographics will drive demand, and other towns around Boston, Salem and Lynn, Massachusetts, they're going to have to do the same kind of thing. And people don't have the housing we need, and we can't build housing that is going to take a couple of planets worth of energy to support either. So that has to change. So the technology is there, but the economics haven't been. But with a new administration, the tax penalties that I think are going to be put in place to force people to do things that are, quote, good for the planet are likely going to happen. You get K through 12 schools, distance learning and hybrid models, and the list goes on and on, Jerry, about all the changes and shifts that we're seeing. And I know that at some point we'll get back to, quote, normal, but I don't think it'll be like it is today, but I also don't think it'll be like it was in February 2020. So lots of doors to open, to walk through rather, and I think the progressive firms are going to take advantage of this window of being able to differentiate that simply didn't exist a year ago.
I think that's a good place to end. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
It's been a pleasure, Jerry. I really appreciate the opportunity. Wish everybody out there the best.
Great. Thanks very much. This has been the Engineering Influence podcast brought to you by the American Council of Engineering Companies.